What is going on, alpha males? Back on the road. Coming at you from the new mobile studio version 2.0. If you are in the know, if you're a patron, you already know a lot of details about that, but had some issues crossing the country. By God's grace, we are back on the road. So welcome to the Mobile Studio 2.0 for the Alpha Male podcast. I think the first Alpha Male, I did a few Gunfighters, but the first Alpha Male podcast recorded in Mobile Studio 2.0. So, the podcast where we talk about what it means to be a man the right way with God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. Today's episode is going to be about vehicles and vehicle kits, as I've spent an inordinate amount of time this week looking at vehicles and choosing a new vehicle and all those kind of things. As much as I would rather talk about guns or something else, vehicles are on the brain. I'm going to share with you guys, if you listen to the basic toolkit, a lot of that applies to the vehicle. I'm going to go with some, let's call it the next level preparedness kit for the vehicle. Alright, so I might do another episode on guns. I might briefly mention them here, but I'm mostly talking about all the stuff I took out of the vehicle, and I laid a lot of it aside and took a picture. Some of the things aren't in the picture because they wouldn't fit, but I thought it would be a good episode to talk about. So I'll probably plug in the bio here when I have a normal laptop and recording and stuff, and I'll put in the bio, and then we'll get into the main topic. Who am I? A question we should all ask ourselves. I am, first and foremost, a servant of God, made in His very own image, a follower of Jesus Christ, a simple man called by God to the Great Commission to share the good news of Jesus Christ. Next, a little bit about my background and what God has allowed me to do and blessed me to do in life. Grew up what most would consider very poor in the backwoods of the southeastern and mid-Atlantic United States, hunting and fishing. Joined the Marine Corps at 17. Did a couple of combat tours in Iraq. So a decorated Marine Corps combat veteran. Infantry assaultman. After the combat tours, I was an urban warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps under Mojave Viper. I also served in the U.S. Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. Also a veteran of law enforcement. I served with LAPD. I was a sworn peace officer, a cop for LAPD. I worked regular patrol assignments and more specialized assignments. One of those more specialized assignments was warrant service, fugitive recovery. Also had some other law enforcement roles. I am an FBI certified firearms instructor and been certified by another 3-letter government agency in a lot of firearms and training things. I've also been a private contractor, worked in the private sector, pertaining to tactics and gunfighting and protecting America from enemies foreign and domestic. I served as the commander of a tactical team to stop active shooters in a large metropolitan area. That was our primary mission, to stop active shooters, which sadly are a thing in America today. I've also been blessed to do quite a bit of competition shooting. Started my first formal competitions even before joining the Marine Corps at 17. I had won more shooting competitions than I can remember. I have competed in all manner of disciplines in shooting. I've been blessed to be a state rifle and pistol champion, West Coast regional champion. Like I said, been blessed to win more shooting competitions than I can remember. Mentioned hunting. I've hunted to put meat on the table starting when I was a child. I've also been a professional big game hunter and guide, hunting and slaying all manner of beast. And I don't apologize for that. Humbled to be the host of 3 podcasts. Simple Man Sermons, Alpha Male Podcast, and Gunfighter Life. Obviously, as things not mentioned, I've been blessed to do many other things. But, again, first and foremost, I'm a servant of God, a believer and follower of the Bible, the Word, Jesus Christ. And I don't apologize for that. With that, let's transition into today's topic. Let's talk about something more important than any tool, than any weapon, than any tactical kit, than any multi-cam, whiz-bang, level 4 item. A Bible. A Bible belongs in your vehicle. I have 2 of them on my dash. I have probably more than that in the vehicle, but 2 on the dash. Different translations. I like to have different translations on hand. Sometimes you get downtime. And if you get downtime, you're waiting for somebody, you're waiting for something to open, whatever. What better way to spend that than in the Word of God? And I've mentioned it before, I don't get any sponsors or any kickbacks, but the Bible app, it is free. You can get the Bible read to you audibly. And that's a great thing. I like to consume content, especially when I'm driving. A little thing about me is I don't like driving. You may think that I live as like a neo-nomad, that I like driving. I don't like it at all. A lot of people do. I don't like it. I don't like sitting down for, let's say, more than 2 hours. I get antsy, and any more than 4 hours, I really don't like it. Maybe not physically, but spiritually and mentally, it makes me feel better knowing that I'm being productive, and being able to absorb the Word of God while in the vehicle is a beautiful thing. That Bible app, it's good day to day. It's also good in the vehicle. Some of the versions on there, not all of them, but some of the versions, I think NIV and the KJV, you can just click the button and press play, and they will read them audibly, so you can listen while you're driving. It's a great thing. Now, let us talk about lights. One of the things that I have on my dash right now, just in front of, or I guess behind, if you're going from the front of the vehicle, just behind the Bibles, is a Goal Zero. And that is a solar-powered flashlight, lantern, and cell phone recharger. Super handy. It's not great at recharging a cell phone. It really isn't. It's not as good as one of those portable battery packs, which I also have in the baby bug out bag. But if my phone went completely dead and my cable wasn't working or something, the jack in the car wasn't working, whatever reason the car was completely dead, I could use that probably to send a text, which might be a game changer in a bad situation. But what it is good for is it's solar powered, so I don't have to rely on batteries. Like, I have a battery powered flashlight in the vehicle, and then I go to turn it on to work underneath the car at night, right? And then the battery's dead. So that's no good. This one has solar powered, so as long as it got some sun that day, which in the dash it probably did, it should be a fairly decent LED light. And it's an LED flashlight and an LED lantern. So I like it for that. A good friend gave me that years and years and years ago. I still have it. I don't use it very often, but when I do need to use it, it's nice to have it. You might want a better, dedicated vehicle light. Since you're not carrying it, it doesn't have to be as light as your EDC light. But something like one of the old D-cell mag lights in the LED version or something like that, it might come in really handy for a lot of things. And that might belong in your vehicle kit. Alright, so I did an earlier episode on a basic toolkit. Now I live, unlike most of you guys listening probably, I live semi-nomadically, meaning I am a stranger and a pilgrim on the earth, right? So a lot of this is the same for me. But for you should have a good vehicle basic toolkit. And go back and listen to the basic toolkit episode to figure out what that is. wrenches, socket set. Depending on your vehicle, metric and standard. A lot of vehicles, confusingly enough, will have some of both, because some parts are made overseas and some parts are made here. Even on American vehicles, a lot of the parts will be metric. So, if you have if your entire vehicle is standard, then you can just get standard. If your entire vehicle is metric, maybe just metric. That being said, have the stuff appropriate for your vehicle. A basic toolkit. And that includes, basic stuff, duct tape, things like that. I'm not going to rehash the basic toolkit. I'm going to call this, Vehicle Preparedness Items 2.0. Or maybe a better title than that if I can think of one. But that next level up in your vehicle emergency kit, right? So, a few things, and it's going to be a kind of a mix between, maintenance stuff and kind of tactical stuff. So, if you like either one of those, I'll try and mix it up a little bit for you. If you've listened for any length of time, you know the baby bug out bag and what's in there, or go back and listen to that if you want. But that rides shotgun pretty much. Pretty much it rides shotgun hanging on the seat, the baby bug out bag, so I can grab it. If I need to grab it in a quick hurry, I can just hit the release button and release the strap and grab it and go. Also riding shotgun a lot of the time is my, last I weighed him, 110-pound Rhodesian Ridgeback Alexander Hamilton. That's a good vehicle preparedness item, because if people are looking for a vehicle to get into, they probably don't want to get into the one with the 110-pound Rhodesian Ridgeback. Anyway, aside from that, that's probably not what you tuned in for. A shovel, right? A shovel, as far as the bigger tools go, not something you'd find in a standard kit. A shovel is probably what I use the most, okay? I've used the shovel, I don't know how many times it's come in handy. I have the Cold Steel, whatever they call their Spetsnaz shovel. It's a version of the Russian military shovel. I was issued e-tools in the American military. I think the Russian design, like a lot of their designs, is simpler, more robust. I like it. It may even be lighter. It's definitely simpler. It's a robust wooden handle with a steel blade, which I think I probably sharpened, knowing me. But it's a good, handy little shovel. It has gotten used a lot. Probably, again, aside from, well, even with the basic toolkit, the shovel's probably been used maybe the most of anything. And a light, handy little shovel, even if you drive a car and you don't drive a truck. If you do drive a truck or you live somewhere with a lot of snow, you may want a little bit bigger shovel. If you're trying to shovel out of snow, that tool will get it done, but a proper snow type shovel or a proper spade would do you much better. But some kind of shovel, right? For digging out of sand, for all manner of things. The shovel comes in really handy. Apart from the shovel, I also have a hatchet that I keep in here. Mine is kind of more on the tactical side. That's not really why I have it in here. It's just because I had it, and why not have it handy in the vehicle. Another thing that I have is a full-size fireman's axe. And this gets used, and the fireman's axe, if you're not familiar with it, has a proper axe head like you would see on a lot of things. And I guess maybe fireman's axe is not the proper thing. When you think of a fireman's axe, you usually think of the one with the spike on the back. Mine has a hoe on the back, or like a pickaxe type end for digging trenches, for digging, for things like that. So it's some things when you're digging you want a shovel for, and some things you want a pickaxe for. Well, this will do that, and it's also a good full-size axe. So go look up one of those kind of utility axes. I would highly recommend having one. Don't just get that and not get a shovel. Even a small shovel is better in a lot of soil and a lot of snow. You don't want to be trying to dig out, snow with a pickaxe. But if you're in rocky, nasty soil or something like that, or trying to get through a log, if you're on a logging road, which out west I often found myself on, one of those axes can really come in handy. A good full-size axe. Also, talking about the more tactical stuff, mechanical removal of someone from a vehicle if you have to get a vehicle open. That is basically a giant, really long pry bar, right? So there is that. It's good for that. It's good for having that if you had to get somebody out of a burning vehicle or something like that. It would be a decent tool. It's not like the jaws of life, but it's certainly better than your EDC knife for that kind of application. So there is that. And that's a good segue. A crowbar, and somebody mentioned that, something I left out of my basic toolkit, and they're absolutely right. That is something that I generally keep, is a small pry bar. They come in super handy, and there is something you should probably have in your kit. They come in handy for all kinds of things. Just a good, handy pry bar. Whether it's like a flat kind or more of a traditional crowbar, they are really good and worth having if you're having this next level of toolkit. Another thing I carry, a lot of you will have a 4-way for like all kinds of lug nuts and things like that, which reminds me, I don't have a 4-way, I have a breaker bar, which is a really, really long, robust, think of it like a giant wrench. And I have the appropriate socket for my old vehicle, which means I need to check and make sure, and if it's not, get the appropriate size for my new vehicle, because that would not be very preparedness-minded of me. But a good breaker bar or a 4-way lug nut wrench, depending on you. I like the big breaker bar, especially if you're working on, well, if a lug nut gets stuck, let's put it that way. If you listen to my Manly Skills episode, one of the very early episodes of Alpha Male Podcast, as a man, you ought to know how to change a tire. Like, that should be something that you probably learn in school that you don't, but a very basic skill, guys. But you need something to be able to do that. I like a breaker bar with the appropriate socket, but if you want your old school 4-way, that'll work. Or a lot of them come with your vehicle. I guess I should mention a spare tire. Most vehicles come with a spare tire. If your vehicle does not, you should get one. A lot of newer vehicles, surprisingly, I don't know about a lot, but some newer vehicles don't even come with a spare tire, which is kind of crazy to me. But a spare tire, a way to change it, which means a 4-way or a lug nut wrench or a breaker bar or anything like that, and also a jack, a decent jack. A lot of the jacks that come with vehicles they are not the safest jacks. You might want to look at a good bottle jack or a bigger, thicker, more robust jack that comes with your vehicle, especially if you find yourself off paved surfaces often, which I do. You probably want something, because those are designed for like on the side of a road. If you're on dirt, have fun trying to take that standard jack that might come with your vehicle and jacking up a vehicle. If you don't want to go that route, you can just carry a few spare pieces of wood in your kit, which I had advised anyway. I generally have 2 different size lengths of 2x4 that aren't that long. These are good for many things. They make a good impromptu rubber mallet for beating something if you do have like a stuck lug nut or something like that, or you're trying to get a trailer hitch on or off and it's just stuck. For all kinds of things, a good length of 2x4 is good for whacking on stuff that you don't want to whack on with steel. So they're great for that. They're great for what we just talked about, putting them under a jack if you're on soft soil. They can also be used for traction, and the way that you can do that is to lash it to your tire with a cargo strap. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, if you can't picture it, when you get stuck and your tire is spinning, if you don't have 4-wheel drive, or even if you do sometimes, if the ground is really soft and muddy or something like that, you can lash this on the outside of your tire with a cargo strap. You can look up how to do this if you can't picture it, so that it spins on the tire, and every time it hits, it will move you a little bit. And that's certainly better, and if you're in a real tight jam, it can get you to a place that's not as soft in soil. So those lengths of 2x4, and I mentioned it, so I'll go on with it. The cargo straps. Those are good for all kinds of things. Just have them in your car. They're not that expensive. I've accumulated I don't know how many over the years. They come in handy for all kinds of stuff. If you don't use the ratcheting cargo part of it, then you can just use it like a good strong rope. So those cargo straps, right, have a few. Even if you drive a car, you might have a time where you need to move something and have to put it on the top of your car or something like that. Those cargo straps come in really handy. And moving up from that, a tow strap. I don't care if you drive a Honda Civic. I don't care what you drive. Have a tow strap, because you may be driving that Honda Civic and you may get stuck. You may skid off the road when it's snowy out, or go a little bit too far off the shoulder in the desert, and you can't get out. And somebody might drive by with a truck and they probably should have a tow strap, but maybe they don't. So you should have a tow strap no matter what vehicle you drive. And if you have a truck, if you're an alpha male, part of your job is not just to drive from place to place, but you should be prepared to help others if they get stuck. So bad snowstorm, somebody goes off the road, something like that, you ought to have a tow strap. So have a decent tow strap, right? That is something that you should have. Have a good quality tow strap, at least rated for your size vehicle, right? If you drive a smaller car, at least have one big enough to pull your car out. If you have an F-150 or a Hummer or whatever you drive, have something big enough to move that, right? Because it kind of defeats the purpose if you don't. So a good quality tow strap, maybe tow chains. I would go the tow strap route because I don't use mine that often. When I lived way high up in the Sierra Nevadas, I would use it more. A lot of people going through there just didn't know how to drive in the snow. They're good to have, but chains are just heavy. So unless you just have a kit like a toolbox in the back of your truck and you want some beefy chains in there, I'd go the tow strap route. Know how to tie proper knots. If you tie a lot of the regular knots, if you're not familiar with knots, like how to tie a bowline, and you put that in there to pull somebody out, you put a lot of tension on that, you may never get the knot out. A minor issue, but just a good other thing from the Manly Skills episode. Know your knots. Know how to get your knot on. Girls only like guys with sweet skills, or something like that from Napoleon Dynamite, right? I don't own a TV, but I did back when Napoleon Dynamite came out. So you want those sweet skills. You want toe strap skills. You want knot skills. You want tire changing skills. Girls appreciate guys with good skills. So there is that. The toe strap. So leaning a little bit more towards the tactical aspects here. All those things we mentioned you can probably use as a weapon if you needed them to, but escalation of force, probably don't want to go beating on somebody with a tire iron unless it's your last ditch thing. I don't know why you wouldn't be carrying a gun, but anyway, there's that. Moving up, escalation of force, pepper spray. I carry a moderately decent size version of pepper spray canister, mace, whatever you want to call it, capsaicin, in the side door of the vehicle, because not everything's a deadly force scenario. Riot, civil unrest, if you find yourself in a big city, something like that where you want to get a number of people away from you so you can get in your vehicle, or you want to get people out of the way to avoid hitting them, or something like that. There's any number of situations where a good handy can of pepper spray, that's close by, would come in handy where you don't want to use deadly force. So I don't carry that as part of my EDC every day. A lot of people probably would suggest it. I'm kind of at the limit of what I want to carry for EDC. So you can listen to whole other EDC episodes on that. I don't want to turn that into this. But pepper spray, I have it in the vehicle, in the front of the vehicle, handy. Also up there, I have 2 pair of handcuffs. Why 2 pair? Because I already had them, to be honest. But I would suggest having 1 pair of handcuffs or flexi cuffs. You never know when you get into some kind of citizen's arrest type scenario. And look at the laws in your state, but I was a police officer for quite a while. A lot of times, citizens have a lot of authority to arrest that they don't know. A felony committed in their presence, something like that. There may be a time you've used pepper spray, you've done something, you've even maybe had to use a level of force higher, and now that person is still maybe a threat, but you can get control of them, and you might want to be able to detain somebody. You might want to detain them for first responders or police. Having handcuffs and knowing how to use them, or having flexi cuffs, maybe something you want to consider for your vehicle kit, right? Side note on that, if you have the handcuffs, you had better know where the handcuff key is. Don't be that guy. Wherever my handcuffs are, that's where my handcuff key is. Don't be that person, right? But I really like the ASP handcuffs from my years and years of using handcuffs. I like to ask brand, but for you, if you're just going to just in case, Smith & Wesson, Peerless, they make fine handcuffs. They'll work just fine. And a good pair of flexi cuffs, are really, really beefy zip ties, not your standard, rinky-dink zip ties. Which, I'll mention zip ties, they should be part of your vehicle emergency kit. They can get you out of a pinch in a lot of scenarios. Not a permanent fix, but they might get you off the side of the road. Maybe you cut a couple inches off a hose and have to use that for the time being to keep that hose on there or something like that. But zip ties, and real beefy zip ties, if you're going to have those stand in as a restraint. Another thing I keep in the side door is a collapsible baton. I like PR24s, although I don't have mine anymore. Maybe I should get another one. Look up what a PR24 is. It's a side handle, UR handle style baton. I have quite a bit of training with that, so I probably should have one. But I have a collapsible baton because I got tired of carrying the big, heavy baton, although in the car it'd be a non-issue. But I carry a collapsible baton. Again, there may be a time when you don't want to go to a gun, you don't want to go to a knife. That baton, maybe mace isn't working and you want to take one step up and you don't want to go all the way to deadly force. Now, you got to know what you're doing with a baton, because if you use it incorrectly, that's the better word, incorrectly, it is deadly force. But it doesn't have to be if you know what you're doing. Also can be used as quite a good control device to get people to do what you want, if you are the good guy making them do the right thing to help them out later. Alright, going back, I said I'd try and keep it for both people that were into the tool stuff and the vehicle preparedness stuff and the tactical stuff. Two things you should have: a jerry can or something similar to a jerry can, that's the old military canisters, a 5 or 6 gallon with water, and one with fuel. Now, you might want to go a little bit smaller if you're driving a car with a trunk, but even my wife, I think, carries a 2.5 gallon in her car. I carry, even when I had the Hummer, I carry a full, proper 5 gallon gas can. I used to have 2, now I just have the one. I have a proper 5 gallon gas can, and I have a 5 gallon water can. And I keep those in the back. And the reason I do that is not just for me. My standard SOP, if I'm not on a road trip, if I'm just daily driving, don't let the vehicle get below half. If it is, go fill it up before you go home. Anyway, not necessarily for me, but what if you come across that person that's broken down and they just need gas, right? You want to be the alpha male. You want to be the guy that can help them and give them a gallon of gas to get them where they're going. So that gas canister, your vehicle runs on gas, so having a little bit of spare gas, that's something you should have. Even in a small vehicle, you can have a little bit of spare gas. And water, your vehicle, antifreeze, which is another thing we'll get to, but if you're just needing to get somewhere and you're having a leak in the system, you can keep filling it with water to get where you're going if you have to, and just make sure you put antifreeze in it before you get somewhere where it's going to freeze, which is going to lead me to my next things you should have: all the fluids for your vehicle, from the least to the biggest, right? So, power steering fluid, brake fluid, and you should know where these things go in your vehicle, right? This is part of basic vehicle preparedness, but power steering fluid, brake fluid, and transmission fluid you should have. You should have, obviously, oil. You should have a couple of things of oil. You never know. You should have a couple of things of oil in your car, just put it that way. Oil, we already covered gas and coolant, right? Engine coolant. You should have 1 or 2 things of this. I would suggest having at least as much as your vehicle takes. For a proper size truck, that might be as much as 3 gallons. If it all dumps out, to get you to where you're going. What happens, and I've had this happen, more than once, you're driving and for whatever reason your car overheats or a hose busts and you lose your coolant. Well, you're pretty much stuck there. You want enough to be able to refill the system after your vehicle cools down. Hoses are a thing that break. they're kind of like magazines on a pistol, right? They have a lifespan. So if a hose goes out and you have a spare length of hose, or you can trim it, that's an old hack, is trim that hose so it's a few inches shorter, because a lot of times they break on the end or where they have a bend. You could patch it up with some duct tape if you have to, or some silicone tape and a couple of zip ties, and it may not be great. You don't want to drive it like that long term, but after you do that, you can refill it up with coolant. So having some extra coolant, not just enough to top off if you get a little low, but I'd suggest having enough if you have a proper blowout to fix that, because your engine really can't run very far at all without it. Anyway, having all those things, I really suggest having those fluids. Now, this is going to be a little bit over the top for most of you guys, but again, I do live semi-nomadically, so I have quite a bit of stored food that's split up between the camper, my wife's vehicle, and the daily driver, right? So I have several months worth of food in my daily driver. You may only want to have a week or something like that. I would say more than a couple of days, right? Have some, because if something happens and you can't get back home, you need food, right? Just like your gas for your car. Your vehicle runs on gas, you run on calories. You can go a while without calories, but having some food in your car, why not? Things that store well, things that doesn't really matter if they get really hot, things like that. I really like the Coast Guard rations, or there's other names for them, but the Coast Guard emergency lifeboat rations. They're calorie-dense bricks of fuel for your body. And also just stuff for day-to-day if you run out of food. A couple of Quest bars or some kind of healthy food that will get you through just an afternoon. I mentioned that 5 gallons of water. That is also for you. It's for the vehicle, but also for you. You've got 5 gallons of water if you need it. You may want to bump that up if you live in the Southwest or somewhere where you can go wait a long, long time without getting to a water source. Talking about fluids, one thing that I also have in the upgraded like version 2.0 that a lot of people might not have in their vehicle kit is a siphon. A siphon can be used for pretty much any liquid. You could use it for gas, you could use it for water. Now don't use it for water after you use it on gas, but a siphon. Having a siphon. What if you're the guy that's out of gas and somebody drives by and they want to help you, but they don't have a gas can because they're not prepared? If you have a siphon, you can take a gallon or so of their gas, assuming they don't have some kind of crazy anti-tamper device or something like that. But you got a siphon, you got a decent length of hose, you can get some gas if they're willing to give you some of their gas, a gallon, a half gallon to get you on down the road. Also, again, for water, if you needed to pump water from a source and you needed a siphon, you should have that. They're not that expensive. Now, going back to tactical stuff, one thing that I carry, I don't know if I would suggest it. Somebody in my group chat said that they're illegal, which even in California where like nunchucks are a felony to have, I didn't see anything against these, and that's caltrops. If you don't know, these are bent pieces of metal that no matter which way you throw them on the ground, a piece sticks up. You can use your own thoughts for what those could be used for, but if you're into the preparedness, tactical side of things, there may come a time where those might be useful to you, and I'll just leave it at that. I've never used mine, but I do have them handy in the driver's side door in case I had to grab them. So just know that that's something that exists. Look up what a caltrop is. Somebody told me they were illegal to have, which seems really strange to me. If you can carry a gun and a knife, but not those. But anyway, there's that. That's another tactical thing you might suggest having. Going on the tactical side, I have a kukri in my vehicle. Depending on where you live, you might want a kukri or a machete. Machetes are good, especially in like the Southwest where it's mostly, vegetation and things like that. If you want to chop more woody plants and you want kind of a go-between as far as, thin branches and something a little bit beefier than an average machete, you might go the kukri route. I have one of those. Keep it in the vehicle. I do use it quite a bit, mostly not for the vehicle, but I have it in the vehicle in case I decide, hey, I want to go out reconnoitering today and I want to go trailblazing and literally cut a trail. so I can haul a canoe in or out, or whatever the reason is. I'll grab that and I'll start hacking away at stuff. I should also mention, in the Southwest, the barrel cactus or things like that, if you need water, if you need food, yucca plants, things like that, a machete, or even better, a kukri or something like that can come in really handy. Yucca root, things like that, or getting water out of a cactus if you absolutely have to. I've spent large chunks of my life in the desert, did a whole episode on desert survival, but there is that, and it does have that utility. Harvesting agave in the Southwest, it's actually one of the things that I got the kukri for, was harvesting agave. It's one of the things my wife and I like to do, is go and forage. And agave can be a pretty beefy, big plant, and you need a pretty substantial tool to harvest it. I like it roasted. It's quite delicious. Anyway, kukri, something you might want to consider. Let's talk about another really important part of your vehicle as far as keeping forward momentum, and that is your tires. Tires are important. Keeping your tires in good shape is probably good preventative maintenance, making sure they have a decent amount of tread on there. They're not going to blow out. They're not bald, especially in adverse weather conditions or off-roading. Make sure you have a spare. Even if your vehicle didn't come with a spare, get a spare. Get a used spare from a junkyard or a scrap yard, a simple donut that's the same outer diameter, but have a spare and a way to change a tire. That being said, it's not always the best choice or feasible or safe to change that tire where you are. There's a couple of other options. That green slime can work really well. If you have like a small pinhole leak that's really slow, you might be able to put some of that in there and get you to the end of the week. Say it happens and you've got a hectic week of driving back and forth to work. You just want to get to the next day that you have off so you can address it properly. That green slime can help. Or if you just have to put some in your tire to get you to the next gas station, it's not safe on the side of the road where you are, there's no good shoulder. Or the next thing I'm going to talk about, I've used I don't know how many times, and that's a tire plug kit. If you know how to use it, they are worth every penny. They're not expensive. They're probably under $10, and they're worth every penny. It's like a T-handled punch, and the most common things in my experience you get in a tire is like a screw or a nail or something like that that's small and in the tread of the tire. And what you can do is locate it first. So a good tip for that is some soapy water. If you can get some kind of soapy water, or dump some kind of water on the tire to locate the leak if you can't find it. Then take silver Sharpie or some spray paint that you have in your car for your targets for going to the range, and spray paint the tire so you don't lose it again, so you know where it is, right? So you've located your leak. That T-handle, if you look at it, it's kind of like a big needle with a spiral on it. That spiral, you clean off the edges of the hole, and then there's these little, I don't even know how to describe them. They're like a rubber yarn, and they're pretty soft and malleable, and you put them in the eye of this needle, and the needle is kind of open on the front, so you shove it in, you twist it around and pull it out, and that stays in there. If you do it right, and you might have to do it once or twice, but if you do it right, it plugs the hole really well. I've seen them plug so well that I didn't even bother replacing the tire. Like, they can work really well. Sometimes they don't always work if the hole's too big or not symmetrical, or you get a rip in the sidewall or something like that. It might not help you. But in a lot of situations, in the most common punctures, those tire plug kits are awesome, and they're only a few dollars. I think every vehicle ought to have one. The one I have in here is so old, I might go ahead and replace it next time I'm in the automotive aisle to buy stuff for changing oil or something and think about it. But I've used them quite a bit. I taught my wife how to use it, and they really are nice. They really can come in handy. Again, it's not always safe or feasible to put on a spare depending on where you are, especially if you're like in the woods or something like that. It may be safer to just plug the tire. And once you plug the tire, you're probably going to have to put air in it. One thing, my wife, I gave her my old one, and I put one in this vehicle, and this is more than just this function, but it's a small air compressor that you can plug in to the 12 volt adapter like you would for your cell phone, and you can do that and pump your tire full of air. Now, it takes longer. It's not like a legit air compressor, but it works. I've used them several times. They do work. They do add air. If it takes you 15 minutes, it is what it is, but it will do it, and it will pump air into the tire. The one that I gave to my wife is quite a bit older. It's got a lot of other multi-functions. I put it in her trunk because it's smaller, and she's got a smaller car. The one that I have now, in addition to being an air compressor, it's also a backup battery. It's a jump pack. I got a fairly substantial one because the Hummer was fairly big, and this new vehicle is even bigger. So, a fairly substantial jump pack, enough to jump your vehicle a couple of times. Having a spare jump pack, even if you have jumper cables, is really nice to have. Sometimes you park in an area where you can't get jumper cables to it, or sometimes there's nobody around, and that just happens to be the time that your battery takes a dump, right? So, and dumps all its energy, and you're stuck. You can at least use this to get going again, or again, that scenario, somebody else. And sometimes it's a lot safer to just carry this to where they are than trying to maneuver your vehicles on the side of the road and turning around the wrong way on the freeway to get your vehicles facing each other to jump it. Sometimes you just grab the jump pack, walk up, start their vehicle, and off you go. The jump packs, again, mine's got an air compressor. It also has a flashlight on it, and it also has a 12-volt plug-in just like in your car. So if it's charged and for some reason your vehicle is dead, you can at least charge your cell phone. So some redundancy there. It's a nice thing to have. It's a pretty beefy item, but I use it a lot. It comes in really handy. It just, even like in camping, it's got a small light on it, and it's such a big battery you could run it a long period of time. It comes in handy for a lot of situations. So one of those decent jump packs, suitable for the size vehicle that you drive. They are really handy. Now let's talk about some hot and cold weather stuff. Extreme weather conditions, right? Sometimes your vehicle is the best shelter, sometimes it's not. I do carry a fairly substantial tent, too big to fit inside my bug out bag. My bug out bag has its own shelter. Might want to listen to other episodes on bug out bag stuff. However, I have a big legit tent, like big enough for the family, in the vehicle. Redundancy just in case you want that shelter. Like if you're out in the desert or somewhere really hot, you probably don't want to be in the car for shelter, right? So I have a tent. If you don't want a tent, I would still, and even if you have a tent, either way, the next thing I'm going to suggest is a tarp. A tarp can come in super handy. Again, if it's really hot outside, that vehicle can be like a greenhouse. Even with all the windows down, it might be really hot. Having a tarp that you can, lay something on the top of the vehicle and just make a lean-to or something to get out of the sun can be really nice. Also, if it's really cold, if you're working on your vehicle and it's snowy and wet and just nasty, miserable on the ground, you can lay that tarp down and work on your vehicle. You can also lay it down and lay all your tools on it so you don't lose them if you're in the grass or whatever environment you're in, right? Keep your tools fairly clean. They're so cheap, those, just basic tarps. Why not have one in your vehicle? Also, if you break down and it's really cold, I advise you to have some of those emergency blankets and things like that, which are, again, the baby bug out bag, but I have a more legit one in my vehicle kit, like a legit emergency sleeping bag, and I have the tarp so I can wrap up in it. It would, even in a very cold environment, you might not be happy, but you wouldn't freeze to death. So that tarp has a lot of multifunctionality there. Another thing, I said I'd switch back and forth from the practical to the tactical. Bolt cutters. I carry a pair of bolt cutters in my vehicle. They're a good thing to have for lots of different stuff, and doesn't have to be anything nefarious. Bolt cutters can come in really handy. You lock something up and you forget the key, or you lose it, or you have to get into something quickly. There's all number of reasons why bolt cutters can come in handy. Get a decent pair of bolt cutters, have them in your vehicle. You'd be surprised at situations where you need bolt cutters. You can have a metal saw, which I also used to have. My old one was kind of worn out, so I threw it out and need to replace it. But a good metal saw can also get you through some metal if you need to. But a pair of bolt cutters I'd really suggest having in the vehicle. for whatever reason, if you're in some kind of urban environment and there's mass evacuation and your life depends on you're not trying to trespass or anything, but you have to get through somewhere and you go down a route and there's a gate up, you can get through it. They could come in handy for all kinds of situations. So having a decent pair of bolt cutters. Going back to the practical, a fire extinguisher. If your vehicle did not come with a fire extinguisher, just get a fire extinguisher and have it in your vehicle. Vehicle catch on fire. That's a thing. Maybe it's not your vehicle again. Maybe it's somebody else's vehicle. Maybe, and if you've ever spent any time out west, you know that wildfires are a real thing. Maybe you're the first one that just happens to see a wildfire start on the side of the road. That's fairly common. People pull over into dry grass or something. The underside of their vehicle's really hot. It catches the ground on fire. You might be the first one there. You might be able to prevent a giant wildfire. Or perhaps it's, your campfire gets out of control. Or who knows what. Having a fire extinguisher, just good common sense. Another thing, medical kit. I think you should have a decent boo-boo kit, like Band-Aids, things like that. You're working on your car, you slice your finger open. It happens. You should have, like, what I would call the Walmart, first aid kit in your vehicle, which reminds me, I think I left mine in my old vehicle under the seat, so I don't have one. I got to get a new one. But you should have, like, a basic Band-Aid kit, for lack of a better term. And then you should have a legit emergency medical kit. Just did a whole episode on emergency medicine, the March algorithm and beyond. You may want to go listen to that. But having a good medical kit, I don't get any kickback or anything. However, Bear Independent he's the founder CEO of Refuge Medical. They make really good medical kits. I have a small of the back kit in my vehicle, zip tied in the front of the vehicle. My wife has one behind the headrest in her vehicle. Having some kind of emergency thing, I EDC a tourniquet, but I have another one on the kit, and I have a bunch of other stuff in the kit. Having the supplies, is really important. Don't rely on first responders, even in a city. You can bleed out in seconds, in like less than 2 minutes. And the average response time of emergency medicine, as hard as they try, is far longer than that. So have a way to stop the bleeding. Have some emergency medical equipment. We always, I think as men, well at least I do, and a lot of men that I know do gravitate towards the tactical stuff and the other like guns and things like that. But statistically, driving is the most dangerous thing most of us do every day. So don't, lose the forest for the trees. Have a decent medical kit. Now going back to the tactical stuff, I have body armor in my car. It stays behind the front seat of the vehicle. You may or may not want to go that route. Keep it somewhere where it's readily available and handy. But you do what you want, but I have some back there. I also have a ballistic plate that I had fitted into the door of the last vehicle. I need to fit it into the door of the new vehicle. It's just a piece of Kevlar that I had for an old vest. Got rid of the vest and didn't see any reason to get rid of the Kevlar, so I kept it, and I can use that as a ballistic panel in the door. You may or may not want to do that, but that's some additional considerations. And then guns. I might splice in the truck gun episode. I've done a whole episode on truck guns. I don't want to rehash that. It will be a super long episode. So I may either splice that one just completely in and make it a really long episode, or I'll just tell you the two that I've settled on for now. AR pistol. I have an AR pistol. It's proven itself to be really reliable. I was kind of against them at first. I was kind of an old school Marine and thought it had to be 20 inches, and maybe if I had to settle 16 inches. But I started using that AR pistol, the legality term, AR pistol with the pistol brace and everything, and it's a short, light, handy setup. It is awesome for a lot of things, and it certainly has its place in a vehicle, truck gun or vehicle gun, road trip gun, whatever you want to call it. Maybe I'll do a new episode called Road Trip Guns. So there's that, and there's the Mossberg 590S. I've done whole longer discussions on that, but I think A shotgun really should be part of your vehicle kit. Even if you have a rifle, you may just want a shotgun, but even if you have a rifle, I'd say have a shotgun in your vehicle. A lot more flexibility in the shotgun. The AR is kind of a one-trick pony. The shotgun is kind of a jack of all trades. Having a good shotgun with good repeatable firepower, a pump, a semi-auto, something like that. I had my situation all set up where you couldn't really see anything looking in the back of the old vehicle. I'll have to get that set up in the new vehicle. For now, just keep them out of sight, out of mind. But a long gun, right? Because the rebuttal is, well, what if it gets stolen? Yeah, but what if you get shot in the face because you weren't ready? So have a long gun. If it gets stolen, you can replace it. If you get shot in the face or your family gets shot, you can't replace that. Have a long gun in your car. I carry a handgun day to day. I advise all you alpha males to as well. Even so, if I have my choice and if I have time, I'm going to go for a long gun. So have something in your vehicle and have its line 1 gear with it. If it's an AR, I have slung my AR pistol actually stays in the big bug out bag behind the front seat, and I have one of those old military bandoliers that holds 3 magazines and the one in the gun, and it's grab and go, right? It's ready. It's the modern Minuteman, ready at a minute's notice. So there's that. And then I have the shotgun if I want that option, which is my main go-to if I could only have one long gun. I have that. If it's in the vehicle, I keep it loaded with double-aught and slugs in the side saddle. A lot of utility there for just stopping ability. And if I want a little bit more penetration, you got the slugs. I keep it side saddle with deep penetrator, the Federal True Ball deep penetrator slugs, if I want to disable a vehicle or something like that. And I should go back to the AR. I've mentioned this before. I'm not for green tips as your day-to-day defensive load loaded in your AR, but if you're keeping it in a vehicle, you might want 1 mag of the green tip light armor piercing rounds, because you might want to pierce a light vehicle, not an armored vehicle, but somebody else's vehicle if they're shooting at you from inside their vehicle, or you need to shoot out of your vehicle. So having that 1 magazine of that makes some sense. I don't like it day to day for my go-to round, but it does have some utility, stopping a vehicle ramming incident or something like that. So keep that in mind. One thing I do keep in the vehicle, and I got from my wife as well, a gas mask for any kind of riding situation you might find yourself in. But sadly, today we find ourselves in a second Cold War, and I don't take any pleasure in saying that, but I think it would be foolish to be a prepper and not have one of those. If you don't know, and I've done a whole episode on radiation, nuclear war, and you might want to listen to that, but just a simple poncho and a gas mask. Have them, hopefully, and never need them. You should, if you have one, have it somewhere in your vehicle that you don't have to get out of the vehicle to get it, for obvious reasons, more exposure. Also, the potassium iodate, the radiation pills, I do keep those in the center console. Have for years and years. It's a tiny bottle. Again, they're there. Hopefully I never need them. And if I do, they're there, right? So there is that little special part of vehicle preparedness. A couple of other things going back to the very practical and the weather thing. Have a change of clothes in your car, right? Just for a day-to-day. Like, what happens if you want to spend the night at a buddy's house, or you have an impromptu trip, or you spill coffee on your shirt at work. So I have some clothes that I keep in the vehicle, like a nice dress-up shirt. Who knows when I might want to put on a nice collared shirt, right? So I have one of those in there. If I wanted to go to like an interview and I spilled coffee on the shirt I was wearing, kind of a go with anything, think black polo type of shirt. And, some spare clothes, a spare t-shirt or two, a spare set of clothes that you could sleep in, and a spare set of clothes that you could wear, and a practical set of clothes. I've harped on socks before. You should have socks in your baby bug out bag and your big bug out bag in your vehicle. Have socks. If you've ever had to go long distances on foot, I'm an old school infantry guy. Socks really, really can stop you from some bloody, miserable feet, which can really, really, miserable is maybe too light a word for that. But socks. Just a good change of clothes, right? You might want to consider I have a good set of rain gear in the vehicle. Even out west, a good set of rain gear. Even if it's not raining, it can still be warm, but a good set of rain gear, I think, belongs in your vehicle. A couple of ponchos, if in addition to tarps, if you just want to lay stuff on the ground or any number of reasons. But a good poncho, the cheap ones at Walmart are $1. If it's pouring down rain and you got to work on your car and you just want to throw that on, and when you're done, you literally bunch it up and throw it away and don't have to worry about drying it out or anything like that. The good $1 ponchos can really save you. Have one in your jacket, maybe have one in your vehicle, have one in your hunting kit. They're $1, or maybe with inflation now they're $2, but they're so handy. Now the tactical tip. Actually, before I get to that, let me plug Patreon. I'd be a bad capitalist. Men, if you see any value, if any of the things you've heard in this podcast is worth $5 a month, consider becoming a patron. I am humbled that you guys listen. This main source of income for this podcasts aren't free to produce or put out, let alone I have to eat something. I am truly humbled that you guys listen. If you want to step up to the next level and become a patron, I would be very, very humbled. And I sincerely thank everyone who's ever stepped up to become a patron. It is a great blessing. Again, if you don't know, I used to do this for years and years, just costing me money out of my own pocket. Without soliciting for patrons, a great blessing, a man stepped up and asked how he could support. And I was taken back by that somebody actually cared that much. And it's grown since then. And I'm thankful for every thing that people contribute. If you want to contribute and you want a lot of cool insider content, you can become a patron. There should be a link in the show notes. If you want to check out more before you decide, go to goodshepherdtraining.com. goodshepherdtraining.com. All right, now the tactical tip of the day. As you might surmise from my background, I have been blessed to do quite a bit of shooting. Maybe an understatement. I've also been blessed to do quite a bit of shooting at vehicles, which a lot of people don't get to do. Starting from inside a vehicle, shooting at vehicles. The tactical tip from today is a recycle, but I think it bears repeating in case you didn't hear that one episode. And even if you did hear it, it's good to reiterate it. Most of a vehicle is concealment, not cover. Again, most of a vehicle is concealment, not cover. Means it will hide you, but it will not stop bullets. Even a fairly mild 9mm handgun bullet will go through most parts of a vehicle. There are a few that are actually cover. Engine block. It's a big one. Engine block, right? So the hard part of that is, unless you really know your engine, and you're probably not going to be thinking that precisely, and especially if it's somebody else's vehicle you're taking cover behind, you might not know exactly where that engine block is in the front of that vehicle, and a lot of rounds could zip through there. The main thing you ought to think about as cover is A pillar and B pillar. Now, if you are driving in your vehicle right now listening, or you can picture it when you're sitting in your car, that pillar that usually, not always, but usually your seatbelt is hooked to, that's your A pillar. And that is designed in any modern vehicle that I'm aware of to withstand a rollover, which means it's really strong steel. And even when we shot at it with machine guns, it held up. Even with legit, medium machine guns, not your light machine guns or submachine guns, legit machine guns. It probably wouldn't hold it to a 50 cal, but multiple hits, that thing will take. So that A pillar, and the good thing is that it's right there where you are, so if you have to exit the vehicle, keep in mind to keep that as cover. Cover your vitals, cover what's important to you with that A pillar. The B pillar is, in a lot of vehicles, the one behind it, running behind the second set of seats. If you study a vehicle, it's not hard to discern where that is, but the A pillar is generally really easy to discern. It goes right over or right behind the person's head when they're driving, usually where the seatbelt connects, and that is legit cover. You can also stack those, so you can work geometry. Geometry is not just good for passing exams in school. It comes in quite a bit. You'd be surprised at how much it comes in the tactical world. When I dealt a lot with explosives as an assaultman, blowing stuff up, C4, all that kind of stuff, geometry is important. It's important here too. You can do what's called stack the pillars. You can stack the A pillar and B pillar, essentially making them twice as wide, because that A pillar is not very wide. If you know how to stack those and maneuver on an adversary, you can get a tactical advantage, and you can essentially double your cover by stacking that A pillar and B pillar. That's your tactical tip of the day. With that, I want to say thanks for listening. Hopefully to you the most important part of the podcast, the tactical verse of the day. Vehicle denotes traveling, and that brings to mind a verse. They all declared plainly that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. For if they had been mindful of the country from whence they came, they may have been permitted to return. But as it were, they sought a better country, a heavenly country, where God would not be ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared for them a city. I'm all about survival and being prepared, watching and being ready. That said, this world is not my permanent home. I am a stranger and a sojourner on the earth, and so are you. Keep that in mind of what's really important. Really important. If you don't know, the flagship podcast that started all the other podcasts, including this one, is Simple Man Sermons. If you want the preachings of a simple man called by God to share the good news of Jesus Christ, check out Simple Man Sermons. Anyway, with that, thanks, and have a blessed day.